Next chapter, vegetation. Now, vegetation is the collective plant cover growing in a particular area. The term plant in a biological sense refers to all organisms belonging to the kingdom Plantae. In this chapter, we shall deal with the entire plant cover apart from the cultivated crops. Vegetation can be divided into three main categories: natural, derived, and planted vegetation. Natural vegetation is the plant cover that exists naturally in an area without the interference of external modifying influences, especially people and their animals. These plants grow and spread through the natural means of seed dispersal. In modern times, this type of vegetation is only found in isolated areas where people have neither settled nor ventured into for activities like mining and lumbering. Small sections of this type of vegetation are found in almost every country. They represent the original plant cover that dominated the area before human beings interfered with it. If conditions permit, natural vegetation can re-establish itself over time to become dominant once again. This is only possible where the influential natural factors are still favorable. If such vegetation becomes well established and reaches a state of equilibrium with the existing environmental conditions, it is referred to as climax vegetation. Derived vegetation is the plant cover existing naturally in a place but which has been interfered with by people. It is also called secondary or semi-natural vegetation. This type of vegetation may still be under the influence of human activities, or people may have abandoned the area and the vegetation is in the process of recovering from their interference. The vegetation that develops would naturally try to acquire a new climax. This is the most common type of vegetation around us. For example, the lawns of your school compound or homes are constantly being mowed. This prevents the tall species of plants from growing to their normal heights. The result is that some of the tall species die, leaving the shorter varieties which can survive up to that height to become dominant. The grasslands, which are periodically set on fire by pastoralists, are also semi-natural. The fire destroys some plant species while others adapt to the new conditions. A field whose natural vegetation has been cleared and crops planted could later be abandoned, resulting in new plants colonizing the field through natural means of seed dispersal. The resultant vegetation is derived. Derived vegetation may also be established in an area when the plants in a swamp die because the water has been drained. Such plants can only survive under waterlogged conditions. Some of the plants may, however, adapt to the new conditions of better drainage. New plants will also grow in the area, changing the characteristics of the natural vegetation of the formerly swampy area. Planted vegetation is also referred to as cultivated vegetation. It comprises plants that have been planted by people. Most of the new forests in Kenya are made up of trees which have been planted. An example is the forest cover composed of exotic trees which have been planted in the Kenyan highlands. Trees are also planted alongside crops or at the edges of farms. They are taken care of by the owners of the farms when they are tending their crops. This is called agroforestry. The trees provide fodder for domestic animals as well as firewood for the homesteads. Planted vegetation also includes the plants used as hedges, for example cypress and kei apples. Next, we look at the factors influencing the distribution of vegetation. Now, the growth of plants, their distribution and subsequent spread over a region is determined by a variety of factors. These factors can be considered under the following four major groups. Topographical factors are factors related to the nature of the land, especially with respect to relief, aspect, and drainage. Climatic factors relate to the climatic elements such as temperature, precipitation, sunlight, and wind. Edaphic factors are factors that are related to the nature of the soil, while biological factors are factors that are related to the influence of human beings, animals, and birds. We start with topographical factors, and the first one is relief. Relief refers to the physical landscape. It includes the differences in altitude, slope, shape, and form of the landforms. Altitude has a major influence on temperature and rainfall. Higher lands have cooler temperatures. The growth of plants is mainly controlled by temperature and rainfall. Some plants thrive well in warm areas, while others can only survive under cool temperatures. Broad-leaved deciduous trees grow at lower altitudes of mountains, while coniferous trees dominate the high altitude where it is cooler. The mid-latitude section of the windward side of mountains receive very heavy rainfall, which supports a luxuriant growth of vegetation. Mountain tops receive very little rain, and their temperatures are also very low. This inhibits plants' growth. Slopes and the general ruggedness of the land affects the growth and distribution of plants. On very steep slopes, soil development is hindered by heavy erosion and regular mass wasting. The resultant plant growth is therefore very poor. Flat areas located in regions receiving heavy rainfall or where drainage is poor tend to be waterlogged and therefore encouraging the growth of swamp plants. Gentle slopes are the most suitable for proper plant growth since they are well drained. Next is aspect. This is the direction in which a slope faces, especially with regard to sunshine and the rain-bearing winds. Sunshine is important in determining the temperature of a place and also in the food manufacturing process of photosynthesis. The slopes facing the sun tend to be warmer than those facing away. They therefore support a wider variety of plants. Windward slopes are usually much wetter than the leeward slopes. A luxuriant growth of forest is therefore found on the windward slopes of a mountain, while grassland will be dominant on the leeward side at the same altitude. Next is climatic factors, and we start with temperature. Now, the various life processes of a plant like germination, flowering and ripening of fruits, as well as shedding of leaves are dependent on temperature. Trees growing in tropical regions develop broad leaves to enable them to transpire adequately when the rainfall is heavy. Where rainfall is moderate or inadequate, the trees have small needle-like leaves to reduce the rate of transpiration. In cold regions where snow falls, the trees have a conical shape and needle-like leaves to allow the snow which accumulates on them to slide off easily. If this was not the case, the tree branches would break under the weight of the snow. Warm conditions facilitate rapid growth of plants, while cold conditions slow down their growth. Warm places generally have large plants and a wider variety of species, while cool and cold places tend to have small-sized or stunted plants and a limited variety of species. Precipitation. The life processes of a plant can only go on in the presence of moisture. No plant can therefore survive in the absence of moisture. Various forms of precipitation, with rainfall being the most common of them all, provide moisture for plants. The amount of rainfall received in an area determines the kind of plants that are dominant in that area. Regions with an equatorial type of climate, which is characterized by very heavy rainfall, support a luxuriant growth of different species of trees, which also grow very big. On the other hand, the savanna climate, which experiences little rainfall, is devoid of big trees. Only short, stunted and scattered acacias with tufts of drought-resistant shrubs and grasses survive in the savanna. Next is sunlight. Plants depend on sunlight for strength and for food manufacturing during photosynthesis. Places which receive long hours of sunlight have large varieties of plants, unlike those which receive less amount of sunlight and for short periods. Wind. Wind is a medium of transfer of heat and moisture from one region to another. Hot, dry winds cause drought conditions to set in, whereas moist winds are responsible for increased precipitation when they blow over a region. Wind also plays a very important role in seed dispersal. It facilitates the spread of seeds and therefore the establishment of plants far and wide. It is also important in the process of pollination, which ensures the continuity of plants. Next is soil or edaphic factors. Now, soil is a medium in which plants grow. It provides proper anchorage for plants so that they can stand firm. Soil fertility is determined by the type of mineral nutrients present in the soil, as well as the combination of other ingredients like humus, moisture, and living organisms. The mineral nutrients present in the soil are determined by the parent material of the soil, which is usually the parent rock. Soils with well-balanced nutrients support a large variety of plants, while infertile soils have scanty vegetation growing in them. And finally, biological factors. First, human beings. Now, the modification and destruction of vegetation all over the earth is largely through people's activities. Natural vegetation has been cleared to give way for settlements, farms, transport routes, industrial centers, and mines. Large tracts of forest and woodlands have been cleared to provide wood for fuel, charcoal, furniture, and timber for building. Bushfires have caused some plant species to be destroyed completely, while overgrazing has turned some grasslands into pure deserts. Other living organisms. Now, bacteria, earthworms, and burrowing animals play a very important role in improving soil fertility and aeration. Insects and birds play a part in the pollination of plants. This is an essential process in the continuation of plants. Together with mammals, they are also essential in seed dispersal. However, bacteria and insects cause diseases which may result in certain species of plants dying. Large herds of wild animals can also cause damage to pasture through overgrazing. A large population of elephants can destroy trees in wooded grasslands, turning the vegetation into an open grassland. And now we look at vegetation in Kenya. Now, the distribution of natural vegetation across Kenya is mainly a result of variation in rainfall, temperature, soil types, and human activities. The vegetation in Kenya can be categorized as forest, savanna, semi-desert and desert vegetation, heath and moorland, and swamp vegetation. Forests. The area under forest in Kenya today is not more than 7% of the total land area. The forests in Kenya can be divided into the following major types: lowland and plateau forests and mountain forests. Lowland and plateau forests are found between the sea level and 1,800 meters. They are remnants of the former relatively extensive forests which have been cleared by people to pave way for cultivation and settlement. The high temperatures and high humidity at the coast, coupled with the deep porous sandy soils, have significantly influenced the distribution of vegetation. Forests are found in patches from the south coast near the Tanzanian border up to the north of Lamu. In the shallow bays, that is the lagoons and sea inlets, including river mouths, large colonies of mangrove trees exist, with mkoko being the dominant tree species. These trees only survive in the salty muddy water at the coast. Coconut palms and the whistling pines are dominant near the shores. The tree species found around the Kenyan coast are similar to those of the true equatorial forests, except that they are smaller in size because of the low amounts of rainfall received. The plateau forest is found to the southwest of the country on the Gwasu Hills, including the Kakamega forest. It is an equatorial forest with many indigenous species of trees and lianas. The trees are tall, though the very large species are scanty, since the rainfall received is lower than that received in the true equatorial regions, and it is also unevenly distributed. Mountain forests. Above 1,800 meters, the vegetation changes from the savanna grasslands to the tree grassland. This gives way to the mountain or highland forests. In East Africa, these types of forests are best developed in the Kenyan highlands. They spread out over the highlands to the east and west of the Rift Valley, including Nairobi, Kijabe, and the Nyandarua or Aberdare ranges. Also included is the Mount Kenya forest. To the west of the Rift Valley, forests are found in the Nguruman Escarpment and Loita Hills, Mau Escarpment, Kaptagat, and Cherangani Hills. There are also mountain forests on the Elgon and Marsabit mountains. On the eastern slopes of these mountains, where rainfall exceeds 1,000 millimeters, camphor and podo thrive, but the forest lacks cedar. Where rainfall drops below 1,400 millimeters, species of cedar and podo dominate. Next is savanna. This vegetation type is the most widespread in Kenya, as would be expected of plateau regions within the tropics. Approximately 65% of the total area of Kenya is under savanna vegetation. There are three main types of this savanna. These are wooded grassland, bushland and thicket, and highland grassland. Wooded grassland. As rainfall decreases and becomes more seasonal, the forest vegetation gives way to wooded grassland. This vegetation is at times described as tree grassland. The vegetation is composed of grass, which varies in height between 1 meter in the drier areas to 4 meters in the wetter areas. The grass is mixed with trees, especially the thorny acacias, which grow as tall as 10 meters in some areas. The canopies of the acacia trees are umbrella-shaped, providing shade to the ground. This is meant to reduce the loss of water by evaporation from the soil. The leaves of these trees are thin and are shed at once during the dry season. Where rainfall decreases, trees become fewer and shorter, and the grassland becomes more open. Many large trees may grow close together along watercourses because of moisture abundance and the tropical heat. These trees form forests commonly called riverine or galaric forests. Bushland and thicket. This vegetation covers about 48% of the savanna in Kenya. The vegetation comprises a mixture of thorny acacias, which are tall and umbrella-shaped. These trees tower above the general vegetation as they grow as tall as 10 meters, but they are not dominant. In between these trees is a dense growth of shorter thorny shrubs. These shrubs grow in very large numbers, forming thickets of thorn bush. The gaps between the bushes are covered by scattered varieties of grasses and other plants, or they may even remain bare. Island grassland. This type of vegetation is found on the undulating slopes of the highlands. The grasses in these areas include the red oat, the wiregrass, and the manyatta grass. Where forests have been cleared, Kikuyu grass dominates. Clover grows alongside the Kikuyu grass, where the annual rainfall is over 1,000 millimeters. It should be noted that many other varieties of grasses exist in this vegetation region besides the ones mentioned. Next, semi-desert and desert vegetation. This vegetation type covers about 27% of Kenya. It is found in parts of the northeastern and northern Kenya, including Marsabit and Turkana counties. The annual rainfall in most of these parts is below 380 millimeters. The long droughts, high rates of evaporation, and lack of sufficient surface water makes the problem of insufficient precipitation even worse. The vegetation here is mainly the scrub type. Bushes grow up to 3 meters tall and shrubs get to the height of 1 meter. In between these plants is bare ground. Acacias and comifora are the typical tree species. The plants in these regions have thick leaves in which they store water. The pure desert areas are to the southeast of Lake Turkana. These areas hardly have any vegetation. Permanent grasses are virtually absent. Next is heath and moorland. This vegetation is found on mountains which are beyond 3,500 meters above sea level. It comprises tussock grasses, flowering plants, and alchemilla shrubs. This vegetation is adapted to the cold, windy conditions found towards the summit of the high mountains. Where there is more moisture at the lower altitude, coupled with plenty of sunshine, gigantic plants like the groundsel, lobelia, and heather thrive. As one moves up the mountain, the vegetation becomes more open. This type of vegetation is found on Mounts Kenya and Elgon and the Aberdare Range. These mountains are over 3,500 meters above sea level. Finally, swamp vegetation. Now, where drainage is not good due to the relatively flat relief, swamps exist. Swamps may be found in wet areas as well as along watercourses in dry regions. They are also found in areas which experience periodic flooding. The major swampy areas include the shores of Lake Victoria, which are fed by the Nzoia, Yala, Nyando and Sondu rivers, and along the course of the Tana River from Bura to the river's delta. The third major swampy area is the one covered by the Lorian swamps, which spread across the counties of Isiolo, Wajir and Garissa. There is a wide variety of plants, with the papyrus variety being most dominant. Others include the marshes and grasses with smooth surfaces and long blades. Trees are not common under waterlogged conditions.